Our favourite time of the week to talk to our favourite lady in the world, none other than the wonderful Megyn Kelly, joining us from the United States where the news never stops. Lovely to see you, Rockstar. How are you?
It's great to be here. I'm very well, thank you.
Politics, and a lot of woke stuff we'll get to in a second. But you've always been very clear that people were in the Republican Party, they weren't going to move on from Donald Trump. Iowa, most likely New Hampshire, has proven that. In the end, it seems like it's just unfinished business. I mean, people that have been copying it from their friends and family since 2015 were hardly going to change their mind when they had one last chance to vote for him.
The thing that you see in the media, Paul, is that a lot of them never talk to, know, meet with a Trump voter. And if you know, my job is as a journalist just to stay open-minded to them all and see what is the world telling me, not who am I rooting for. I am very able to separate that from what is the world telling me. And the world has been telling me, and everyone who's willing to listen, very clearly that Republicans love Donald Trump, that the Republican Party is his party and has been for quite some time now, and that while there are still some who don't like Donald Trump within the Republican Party, they are a clear minority. And while it was a divided field, it was always clear that Trump was going to have more votes than any other singular person.
We've won almost every single poll in the last 3 months against crooked Joe Biden, almost every poll. And she doesn't win those polls. And she doesn't win those. This is not your typical victory speech.
Now that he's left with just one other person standing, and that person isn't anything like Trump in her policies and her approach to anything, there's just not enough votes to put her over the top. So it's very clear who is going to win this nomination. And the only real big question left is who's going to win the next election, which comes in November.
We talked about it at the time that I thought DeSantis was dead on arrival because of his position on abortion when it comes to a general election. But obviously he was dead on arrival because he wasn't Donald Trump. Why do you think he particularly flamed out the way that he did? Because, look, while Trump was most likely going to end up being the nominee, normally there's a bit of a fight that at least you don't get down to 2 by the second state to vote.
You know, I don't think anybody could have done it because Trump is just too big a character. If DeSantis had run in 2012, he would have been the nominee and he might have won. Really. Before the walking ball of charisma entered, somebody who's just a normie could win. But Trump is just too big a personality, too big an entertainer, too big a star. He does suck up the oxygen in any room, and it's very hard to overcome that as a normal human. And Ron DeSantis, if anything, had a little bit less than your average amount of charisma. Behind the scenes, he can do it. You know, I was saying on my show today, when I met with him, he was actually very funny. He did an impression of Trump, which was spot on and very funny, like legitimately made me laugh with it. He never legitimately made me laugh during the entire campaign. He wouldn't show that side of himself. And I really wonder whether it's like you go to Yale as like a star baseball player, and then you go to Harvard Law School, and then you join the JAG Corps, you know, the Navy lawyers, like the Tom Cruise, Top Gun lawyers. You come out, you run for Congress, you know, you just have a perfect track record in life. Whether you become risk averse in a unique way, that's not great for politicians. You know, you don't want to take certain risks. You don't want to put yourself out there. You don't want to use humor. You don't want to be too self-deprecating because you have a certain image of yourself that you need to maintain to be that Harvard guy. And I just really think that is DeSantis, and it undermined him. If he could have been looser and shown us his real personality, which I do believe is looser than he projected, not by a huge margin, but there's a delta there, he would have done better in a non-Trump year. He never had any chance in a Trump year.
Well, also, I mean, it's one thing to be the perfect person to run for Congress in your local area, the perfect person maybe to be the senator, the perfect person maybe to be the governor. But one thing Trump has changed forever is that there's a certain dynamism, looseness, dare I say, that's going to be required in anyone who's eventually going to end up as the nominee. Look, again, donors and the machine has its way, but voters are going to be connected to somebody who they think is going to get in there and rough up the place. Because if there's one thing that polls even worse than Biden is the city of which he lives in, DC, the concept of DC.
That's exactly right. And the thing about Trump is even when you know he's lying, when you know he's just saying stuff, like, there's going to be a great plan. Everyone's going to love it on abortion. Okay, that's not possible, right? But it's just a line that he uses. I'm going to be the one to come up with something everyone's going to love on abortion. Really? Are you really? You kind of forgive him because he's got this swagger. Like, I'm speaking of your average Republican voter here. He's got this swagger that makes you say, like, it's going to be fine. Whatever he's going to do, he's going to handle it. And I just trust him net. And they like strength. I mean, honestly, like, this is why Putin is still so popular in Russia. They like strength. Voters like strength. Not all. I realize a lot of people hate both of these men, and very good reasons on the Putin side. In DeSantis, you could see the opposite. Like, despite the fact that he wanted us to perceive him as a strong man, and he was to some extent in COVID, when he got out there on the presidential debate field and stage, he started to waver. He gave that weird statement to Tucker Carlson on his position in Ukraine, and then immediately walked it back when he got hit by the more neocon wing of the party for saying something they thought was asinine. And he didn't just give this is how I feel, which is a Trump move. He showed unsteadiness. And even on the debate stage, he seemed a little too afraid to attack. He didn't seem to get in anybody's face. Now, that's not his style, but I'm just saying there was a telegraphing almost on a subliminal level of a layer of timidity that I don't think people want to see in their president.
It's also been amazing that when Democrats turn around, and yes, we know how this goes between now and November, end of democracy, end of the country, dictator. I mean, if anyone ever has the misfortune of tuning into MSNBC, there's their breakfast show called Morning Joe. Literally, they have to go to 11 every single day, which eventually means they're the boy who cried wolf about this stuff. But the reality is that the legal side of how the system went back after Trump, it rehabilitated him, because after 20, after even the sense of 22 and the candidates that he was backing in, you could say that, okay, great, you won it once, but the record's pretty bad afterwards. But they were able to completely reinvigorate the reason for people to back Trump, who may well have wavered away. In fact, they probably even garnered more support for him. So as they sit back and look forward to all of these court cases, I think that they'll be seeing something different than a lot of Americans will be, which is the persecution of the bloke.
Mm-hmm. It worked for Trump in a couple of ways. Number one, it made the United States, and I mean large numbers of voters, Republicans and some independents and even some Democrats, say, forget it. It's Trump or bust. We cannot allow people to do this with the legal system. We cannot allow the Justice Department and various state justice departments to be manipulated in this way for lawfare, to take down the people's preferred democratically elected or potentially elected candidate. It's never been done before in the United States. This is banana republic stuff. And we've always had a hard line against it. This is a first in U.S. history for a reason. So there was that element of it. And then secondly, it kept Trump in the news and the so-called earned media, where you don't pay for it. It's not an advertisement. You just get covered, which is worth a lot to presidential candidates all the time. It got him so much earned media. And in a way that his controversies didn't anymore drive the news cycles, because we've kind of gotten used to Trump. You don't get the same adrenaline surge when he sends out a mean tweet as he used to. This was the new adrenaline surge. It was the new thing that would keep Trump in the news all the time during the primary contest and going forward. The trials will do it for him over the next year as we lead up to November. So, it is a be careful what you wish for thing, because I know the Democrats think this is just going to completely shock and horrify the electorate when we get out of a Republican primary. But I think it may work the other way. It may shock and horrify the independents on what the Democrats are doing to him.
Now, I understand all of the supposed benefits of Nikki Haley as a candidate, right? If you see what have been strategically part of the problems of the Republicans about, say, issues with women, with people of colour, and let's not play too hard onto that with her, but she is an obvious alternative. But it's been fascinating to watch how MAGA has tried to, and quite effectively, pulled the wings off her. Neocon Nikki, she's the donor favourite, she's Mitt Romney in a dress, all the rest of it, right? Is that true in the way you view her, or is that just the Trump machine getting out the water cannon and doing anything they can to push away an opponent?
It wouldn't work if there weren't some truth to it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work. Yeah, they've seized on her vulnerabilities. You know, she is a neocon. She certainly sounds like a neocon. You know, she keeps saying we need a new generation of change, new generation in the Republican Party. And yes, she's 20 plus years younger than Trump, 25 years younger, maybe even more. But her policies sound an awful lot like George W. Bush's when it comes to, you know, the military and how bellicose she is, and when she talks about foreign countries and their threats. And the Republican Party has moved on from that era. I mean, they've tried it. It didn't go well, and they learned. And I don't think there's a big appetite for it. There's a section of the Republican Party, in particular, Jewish Republicans, are much more hawkish than anybody, and for good reason. I mean, look what just happened to Israel and the threats that Jews are under here in America. And I do believe they have a core belief that, you know, peace through strength is the way. But I think a lot of others have just been too burned, and they're over that era. And Nikki Haley represents the past to them, not the next generation of leadership. And the donor class money is a thing. I mean, it is a thing. Don't get me wrong. Whoever winds up getting the nomination, the donor class comes in and bends the knee. All those bankers on Wall Street, they come in and they bend the knee. They need the president of the United States to love them. So eventually, there's always that relationship. But if they buy you nice and early, then you're more beholden to them. And there's a fear that they can shape your positions and that they're your original, you know, benefactor. And she's benefiting from that in terms of dollars right now, but also getting hurt because people have a natural aversion to the donor class, especially in today's day and age. So some of it's true and it's hurting her. And I just don't think, look, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe she'll resurrect somehow, but it's over for her. It's done. The contest is over.
Literally, the bloke she appointed to the Senate endorsed Donald Trump. Her home state looks like it's going to go for Donald Trump. You know, the fingers crossed.
They all did, and they all will. All the people, like right now, one of the funny things is the media freak out over DeSantis endorsed him after all the terrible things they called him. He called him a meatball. He said terrible things like Ted Cruz got on board Team Trump after he called his wife ugly and said his dad killed Fidel Castro. JFK killed JFK. That's what it was. They all do, because you have to, as a politician, and I would argue as a journalist, check your own desires about who should win and get behind the one who is likely to win so that you can have some influence over him. That's how Ted Cruz is looking at it. That's how Ron DeSantis is looking at it. And in their case, have a future in the party that's telling you they love him.
Is Michelle Obama seriously going to run? I know that she sort of occasionally pops up on a podcast and people project an awful lot onto her, but I get it. Not everyone has to have a public service record to be able to run for president, but even if she did, what is her record? I lived in the White House for 8 years?
Right. Why not one of the daughters? You know, as soon as they hit 35, sure. I too related to an Obama, they could say. Right. Well, the chef. Well, I don't know what happened to Obama's chef.
That's true.
So I don't know. I've been all along saying I don't think it'll be Michelle Obama because she doesn't want to be back in Washington, in the White House, or in politics. However, I'm hearing more about this alleged reach out to top Democratic donors by the Obamas to see if they would support it. There had been 2 reports now in the New York Post from, yes, the gossip columnist Cindy Adams, but that's twice now she's saying she's heard this, and I've heard it as well, that there's been a reach out. So maybe it's true. I mean, the donors are going to talk about it if they get a reach out from Michelle or Barack Obama about whether there's an appetite for her. And the one thing I know, Paul, is that if she wants it, I believe she'll get it. I know that many people believe Joe Biden won't step aside, and I agree he'll try not to. I just think the din in support of Michelle Obama in Democrat circles will be so loud, he won't be allowed to ignore it. So, and I think his numbers are going to go down this year. Yes, Trump's negatives are going to go down too, but Biden's going to have a slip or a fall. Something's going to happen to him. And I just think crisis is coming the Democrats' way, not just the Republicans, and she'll be the answer. That's what they'll think. I don't know how it's going to shake down, but I'm not ruling it out like other people's are.
Well, you heard it here first. Pay attention to the details. Make sure that you listen to Megyn's show every day, Sirius XM, but also find the YouTube and the podcast as well.